This video is dedicated to my viewers who've been watching for a long time. I'm torn between two ways of thinking. On the positive side, I still have impulses to make videos and share my thoughts here on this channel. I even feel a sense of duty to this channel, like I should be nurturing and giving to it and to the people who I've met through this channel who've told me many times publicly and privately how these videos have had significant positive influence on them. But on the negative side of things, the first point is that I really hate what YouTube is like these days. I hate what it's become. And personally, I feel like my quote-unquote best life looks like a life where I'm not using YouTube. And similarly, I would say for my viewers or for anyone I care about, I would think their best life is a life where they're not using YouTube. And so making YouTube videos myself, even if I'm doing it in a way that is sincere to me, it still feels like I'm contributing to this thing that I despise. Second, I've been finding that when I have an impulse to make a video or share my thoughts, often the tone is quite negative. We could say even like the tone of this video so far. And I can't help but feel like when my perspective is just negative about something, it has little real purpose to actually share it because I don't think it's going to improve the situation necessarily. It's going to just embolden this sense of doom and disappointment in myself and in others. The third point is that a lot of my videos were made with this hope to influence other people and to influence them in ways that I see as positive. But as I've gotten older, I feel like this effort is increasingly futile, that I can't change anyone. I can't give people shortcuts. I can't make anyone understand anything if they don't already want to understand it for themselves in the first place. I really believe that the way people think, the way that people emote and behave is generally based on their own life experience. So what they've experienced is providing a filter for what they can see and understand. And when life experience is a prerequisite to true understanding and even true appreciation, then words and art can become empty if they're in a context outside of somebody's known experience. I've been thinking about how a video like this would go for a long time, and there's a lot of times where I wrote it out and I put to paper what I wanted to say, but then I decided to not actually say it because it seemed unconstructive to make something like this. So why is it happening now? Why is this video real? Well, I know that there are some of you out there who've watched me for a long time or even had a line of contact with me for a while who care about me. So really, this video is for you, those people. That's the only way I've managed to justify it. So to get to some topics, let's first chat a little bit about TF2 and my relationship to TF2. So for a minute now, I've been describing this last year of TF2 as the most fun I've had pubbing since I first started playing the game in like 2012, 13, and 14. And even thinking about it now, I actually feel like I can say it's the most fun I've ever had in TF2. And maybe fun isn't the perfect word for it because realistically, I've probably had the most fun in TF2 when I was playing with my friends in a voice call, messing around, or I was working together with them to win a tough match or something like that. But this last year of TF2, I've actually been playing alone 90% of the time as medic in a Valve server, just a generic public game. And I feel like I've gotten deeper into the game than I ever have before. There's something important about it being alone too, because as soon as somebody I know joins the server, it starts to feel a little bit different. There's something very pure and real I've come to enjoy in that relationship I can have between me and a team of players and a team of enemies that I have to get to know within the time of the match. And for various reasons unrelated to TF2, unrelated to this channel, this last year was really tough for me. It was probably the hardest year of my life to happen after 2019. And I really feel like I finally understood what it was like to play a game because you found solace with your role in the game. And so in a way for me, playing medic in TF2 pubs, it was like my rock. It was my anchor to reality. And it might sound crazy even, but there were a lot of times where just in those last 2 hours before bed, when I was in the battlefield healing people, I felt like that was the time that actually mattered in my life, where I was able to get what I needed to scratch that itch that I couldn't scratch in the rest of my life for some reason. And I'm really grateful that I had that I had TF2, that I had Medic, that I had Dust Bowl or Barn Blitz or Badwater or 5CP maps, all that good stuff. And this brings me to think about the fact that there's always been this interesting dichotomy on my channel between TF2 stuff and other stuff, let's say real life stuff that seems unrelated to TF2. For example, I have a lot of these talking videos where I go into these long monologues about big picture life philosophy and my personal experiences. And of course, I've even made some videos that really literally have nothing to do with TF2. And I think this has always been something crucial to my channel identity, that mix of TF2 and broader reality stuff. And I'm sure I've explained it a little bit before, because my perspective is usually that even though it might seem like TF2 is its own universe, it's really just a slice of this bigger reality that we're all in. And the more that you appreciate TF2, whether we're talking about the community or its history, the gameplay, the players, all these things are very enmeshed, of course, with real life, with that broader reality that they live in. Because when you're in a real TF2 match, you're not playing with bots, you're playing with real people. And those people are bringing their broader life experience into the game. And just like how it worked for me in this last year, everyone's bringing their own desires, their own itches that they need to scratch, their own style to the way that they play their character and interact with everybody in the server. And I think all that stuff is really just like a shadow or maybe a reflection of their bigger real lives. And something I really struggle with, and I hope, or I think one day will be looked back on as kind of a primitive way of thinking, is this tendency that we have to cut up and segment the different parts of our lives and act like they just have nothing to do with each other. So our leisure lives, our extracurricular lives, our work and school lives, our relationships, though sometimes we act like these things are separate, and sometimes we might even feel like we are different people in each part of our life, it is just one person, one organism, you, who's responsible for managing all of those different parts of your life. And the pushes and pulls in one quadrant of your life are often counteracted by pushes and pulls in another. It has to all balance out somehow. And I think because we play this game of pretending like those different parts of our life don't have much to do with each other, approaching a holistic understanding of things becomes kind of taboo, or like a sort of forbidden form of knowledge. But I think it's interesting. Let's say we run a thought experiment where we pretend that it is acceptable to be open about all parts of our lives in every part of our life and to assume a sort of connectedness between them. Let's say we had a student who was performing poorly in school. I think it would be so cool if their teacher of one of their classes asked them, like, hey, so what games have you been playing lately? And then they listen and they go, okay, but yeah, what are you doing in those games? Okay, how's it going? Are you winning your matches? What are you fulfilling your role? And then maybe after they listen, they prescribe you some kind of suggestion to tweak your gaming diet or to tweak your gaming life to help with your school life. Similarly, if you've played TF2 as long as I have, I'm sure you know what it's like to have that person on your team with a bad attitude problem or some kind of mental block that impedes their ability to show up as a teammate that simply can't be fixed in a team powwow or just by them playing more TF2. It's whatever else is in their life that's out of balance that's showing up in their gaming leisure life and sabotaging it. This is also part of why the diversity of TF2 players out there is so interesting in terms of who you can meet, because you'll find people playing for so many different reasons. And the final idea that I want to get to today that I've thought a lot about in recent years and feels relevant to whether I decide to make videos or not is getting older and the experience and wisdom that comes with that and the things that you're able to see as time passes. And probably by now, you know, if you know me, you've caught the drift that I definitely have this leaning to be the art has been stagnant for 15 years and society isn't improving guy. Like, that's definitely me. But it's tough too. I don't want to be that guy. It's hard to even admit that I feel like the more I study, the more I explore the past, the more I just keep finding myself kind of floored by how much intelligence and wisdom there's been for a long time or even just in recent centuries, by super articulate people that seems to have mostly been forgotten or just kind of feels very irrelevant and disconnected from the world we're in now. And we could go on about that. That's kind of its own topic. But I want to get a little more personal about my experience growing up both inside and outside of this TF2 world. If we think about this TF2 microcosm, what tends to happen over long periods of time is that people are playing when they're younger, in their teens and 20s. They contribute to the community, they contribute to the culture, and then generally they move on in different ways as they get older. And of course, part of what pushes them away from TF2 in the end is time passing, age accumulating. The experience comes, they get wisdom, and other pressures from life, it kind of redirects them to other focuses. But even if that person was somebody, let's say, who was like really invested in TF2, where they described their youth as being about TF2, maybe they were a big community member or made content for the community or something like this, I found that typically these type of people, when they sort of grow up and leave, they just leave. It's rare that we hear from them about their accumulated experience, about their wisdom. It doesn't really get passed on to the newer generation. The newer generation, who, of course, much of whom are going to walk a similar path to that person and eventually outgrow TF2 themselves, even if they contribute a lot to it in the current time. Something that's disturbed me quite a bit in recent years has been watching the way the Meet Your Match TF2 update has become, or I should say the discussion around it has been murkied by some people who I would say weren't really invested in the events that led up to the update happening. They don't really know the history, or they just might not have even been around playing the game when it actually happened. And it's this strange effect of seeing history kind of casually, slowly get rewritten by the current generation because the older generation didn't really write it themselves. They were so despondent about how things went down from that era of TF2 and that update that most of them just kind of silently left or just kind of slowly, completely checked out. And in that case of Meet Your Match specifically, I remember vividly the trajectory up towards it, as many of you watching might. There were all these years of effort by these competitive scene community leaders to create any kind of dialogue with Valve in hopes to get just a little attention, some support, similar to what Valve gave to CS and Dota. And there were these people like Xtime, who, even regardless of this talking to Valve point, he put so much time, so much money, so much energy into TF2 that he didn't have to. You know, he did it because he chose to. He volunteered to build the competitive scene, put together these broadcasts, put together the events, go on the trips to Valve, make the dialogue happen. And there was so much excitement in the competitive sphere when finally, after years of rumors and hope and hype, it was finally announced April 2015. It's going to happen. We're going to have competitive matchmaking. We're going to get some support from Valve. This is going to be the start of something. And of course, over a year later, the update finally happens, and it kind of felt like the plane never got off the ground. Like we queued up with our tickets. There were some safety tests. We never went anywhere with it. The beta for the update was a total disappointment. The update itself was a disappointment. The follow-up was almost non-existent. And worst of all, the normal way to play public TF2 was changed in a way that the competitive scene never asked for and really had no stake in. Everyone who was invested in that remembers how that original April 2015 optimism, where we had people literally saying, this is going to be the beginning, that quickly turned to a feeling of this is the end. Once that update happened, its aftermath happened, and namely the bot crisis ensued and started from that point. And you can find some final, like, fuck Valve live stream type clips, like there's the famous one from War Her Yeah, and some other prominent community people kind of right before they dipped from TF2 to some extent. But most of these people who lobbied so hard on behalf of the competitive scene and just tried so hard to get some support from Valve, and then this was the result of it, they naturally just became very jaded and sort of drifted away from the scene. No final message, no shared wisdom to the community about that experience and what happened. And because there wasn't any, now you have random fresh TF2 players learning to hate competitive players in the competitive scene because they think, oh, the way that update happened is what the competitive scene wanted or even asked for. But if we think of this idea generally of people growing up, experiencing life, and whether or not they choose to return to their places that really formed them or where they spend a lot of time when they were younger, like this doesn't really happen, unfortunately, in real life very much. This idea of passing down knowledge from elders to younger people. Of course, maybe it happens privately within the family, but then also there's this unfortunate sense that a lot of normal people who have it and maybe should pass it down don't, and then a lot of people who you hear trying to talk about wisdom or whatever are trying to sell something, right? Or they're in it for the wrong reasons. Like, how often do people go back to their middle school once they're a high schooler to give some thoughts and answer questions and share some of their experience of what they expected and what was different and what they had to learn and what they wish they knew when they were younger, and et cetera? How often does it happen that a college student goes back to their high school, right? Or a working adult goes back to their university or their college or their high school or whatever to pass that wisdom down, right? How often does the ex-TF2 player who moved on to bigger things go back and talk to the young TF2 players that they, in theory, were just like once to give them some thoughts? For most people, I think once that wisdom is acquired, there isn't really a sense to dwell in it because it feels like thinking about it even is just kind of rehashing it. So I think usually the impulse is the opposite of saying, let's keep thinking about this, let's pass this on. It's like, let's move on, let's go forward. And similarly, if you think about what I said with the Meet Your Match update and this idea of history being rewritten by newer generations in absence of the old one, seeing this happen just within the TF2 community has really made me wonder how much this kind of thing has surely happened in the real world and in real human history. And probably the most painful part about it is that I relate to this sentiment of getting older, of being weathered down by the experience of life and feeling like, blech, what's the point of proselytizing? What's the point of sharing my experience? This isn't going to be helpful to the people who haven't faced the trials yet or won't face similar trials to me. And if the people are going to face similar trials to me, they'll just learn it themselves anyway, whatever I would try to tell them. But I think if you get caught up in thinking about the people who don't need to hear it, then nothing gets passed on, right? Then wisdom is not shared. And people who maybe need some help or need some guidance or want to hear from somebody who's been through something before that they're just about to get into, they don't get helped. And also, sometimes people are in similar situations, but they still have different obstacles or different things that can get in their way from reaching the kind of conclusions about the situation that would help them. And that lines up a lot with my experience making, especially the kind of talking videos here on YouTube, because there's a lot of videos where I made it, I posted it, it got some nice comments in like the first few days, maybe it gets 1,000 views in that initial moment. And then months, sometimes years go by before somebody adds me out of the blue and tells me like just how important that one specific video was to them and how much they needed to hear it. And of course it makes you wonder too, like how many people are affected in that way that just didn't even feel the need to reach out or didn't tell me somehow, right? And I've said this before, but it's an important point to all this, is even for myself. And I think I'm somebody who has made probably exceptional effort to reach out to a lot of the people that inspired me throughout my life and try to have conversations, try to meet them. There's still so many people who their work or their sharing of their own experience and thoughts I've benefited from a lot that they have no idea. I've never given them a personal thanks or let them know that, oh yeah, it's good that you did that because I actually benefited a lot from that. They have no idea. And I think that this will lead to my final point that's been on my mind, which is that I'm feeling these days more than ever just how important it is to try to shut the noise out and just try to do what makes sense and feels right to you, and to sort of conjure up the strength of your inner voice and try to hear your inner voice, try to hear what it says and what it asks for when it's able to, because sometimes you're not even able to really hear your inner voice when all that noise is there. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I really don't like YouTube these days. I don't think it's a positive thing. And that's a topic I could go on about for hours and hours. There's so much there, so many facets to the ways in which I think things have become not good. But simply, for myself, when I'm using YouTube or similar social media video type sites or whatever, I often just get very cynical and depressed. Even if it's like I'm watching things within my interest, creators I'm supposed to like, or things that are supposed to be of value or relevance to me. Because truthfully, most stuff just doesn't scratch my itch. There's so much noise, and even the curated noise, it doesn't speak to me. And yet this noise is very addictive. It lures you back in. It calls to you. It fulfills social needs. It creates this false, yet real, sense of being in touch and being connected to people. I've been obsessed with the idea of getting away from the internet for a while. Like, it was 10 years ago, a little longer, even when I deleted all my social media for the first time, and I took an abstinence from Steam and games that lasted a year and a half. In those days, I would make like little pacts with my friend to see how many days we could go without using the internet. And it was always this long-term fantasy to me, like, oh, wouldn't it be so great if one day you could just really live unplugged? I don't want to go live in the woods or whatever. I like metropolitan city life. I like walking around. I like going to a concert. I just don't like this like screen reality thing. And in light of that, in March of this last year, I gave up my smartphone and I moved to some simple flip phone thing, which was a choice I felt so satisfied with. Like, I only regret that I didn't do it years sooner. And it's funny. It's like everybody knows that everyone is kind of addicted to internet things nowadays somehow, even if it's just through their smartphone. And of course, all of it feels great. All of it scratches some itch in the short term. It has to, otherwise we wouldn't be using it at all. But I really, really strongly feel like it's not leading anywhere substantial in the end. And I feel like it's making everyone very anxious and tired. And everybody knows this, but also people are very cooperative with that. They know it, but don't want to change necessarily. And I'll just say from my experience, it's crazy how different reality is when you're interfacing with it through social media, through the internet, through what those things are telling you is happening, versus when you just go out and live it, when you don't let all that give you preconceptions about whatever. Because there's so much peace, there's so much connection that you can find, I think, easily in the real world when you're disconnected from all that haze of the online one and all that kind of anxiety and prejudices and ideas about how things really are that it gives you. Because you sort of start, most people I think live more in this sort of online world than the real world, even if they are, commuting to and from their work and school and whatnot. As a final anecdote, just from my recent personal life, I traveled to Japan for my second time, and I spent a week alone in this little city, and I didn't have a phone, I didn't have a plan, I was very unplugged from everything. And I haven't talked a lot about my travel experiences on the channel here, but there's a lot of good stories to tell maybe one day. But I always feel like you find such magical things, or such magical things will happen to you when you're in a explorative mood. And when you have the courage to try things and to start conversations and talk to people and be interested and respectful and kind of take the bones that life throws you. And of course, in contrast from that, whenever I get back from travel or a trip where I'm in that very explorative mood, it's this like obvious problem where I go, how do I figure out how to keep this feeling, this sort of magical, intuitive way of working with reality in my normal life when the daily routines start again, they start grinding away, and you start reaching for comfort in your leisure time instead of exploration and adventure, understandably. I recently read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which I would highly recommend. Probably one of the more important books I've read in my adult life. Just very nice to hear stuff that makes you go, oh, wow. People saw a lot of this coming, and people were quite smart in the past, and it's not crazy to feel the way that I do about things now. And one of the recurrent themes in this book is this idea that technology itself is not necessarily the problem. It's our relationship to it. It's the way that people are choosing to use technology or make technology. And I think using the internet, using phones, so much of that is about control. Like, hey, let's look up where we want to go before we actually go there. Let's look up where we want to eat so we can control the outcome. Let's check the reviews so we can guarantee a certain type of experience. Let's text each other when we're leaving so we can be certain we know the exact meeting time. Everything becomes very safe and planned with no surprises, or that's what we're trying to control. We don't want any surprises. And that's what I feel like the world has become. We all have these private digital addictions. We have these comfort lives that we return to that in the end just kind of keep us away from what I see as the real good stuff. It keeps us away from everything out there that you can experience, that you can only experience, you can only attain when this scenario is raw, when it's uncertain, or maybe even just when it's not giving us dopamine immediately. Right? There's some paths that aren't the obvious path to take from the beginning. And if you always are just taking the obvious path from the beginning, you might be missing out on a lot. Well, I sure feel like that's the case for me, at least. And sometimes it seems like everyone is suffering from this, but everyone is suffering separately, and they're alone in their own personalized, comfortable hell that they've made for themselves. And I'm sorry if that scared you a little bit, but I am trying to scare you a little bit. I'm trying to nudge you on the shoulder like, hey, it's your stop. You gotta get off here. Don't stay asleep on the bus.
Don't stay asleep on the